All right, the room is open. Okay. We do see people joining us. Excellent. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Just real quickly, this is going to be the webinar on balancing parenthood and CS graduate school for those who are just joining us. While we wait for everybody to come in and join the room, if everybody just wants to chat where they're joining us from, that's great. That's always fun to see. Is the chat function working for everybody or no? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's working okay.
Great.
See Mike from Bloomington.
Hi, Mike from Bloomington.
Go Hoosiers.
Or it could be, well, it's Mike from Bloomington, Illinois, not Indiana. All right, so this webinar is going to be recorded and the recording link will be sent out for everyone who is registered and who is attending. We have someone joining in from Chicago, Tokyo. Very early morning indeed. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Okay, we'll just give everybody a couple more minutes to join us before we get started. Dave from San Jose. Excellent. All right. Toronto. Someone's giving instructions in the chat. Very helpful. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Martinez. I'm with the Online MCSDS program here at the University of Illinois. For those of you who are just joining us, this is a webinar on balancing parenthood and CS graduate degree. I'm just going to do, we're going to do a quick round of introductions. Well, first, I guess I'll just call out everybody who is here, and then we'll do formal introductions with our student panelists. So first, again, my name is Christine Martinez. I'm an academic advisor with the Online MCS and MCSDS program. Joining me this morning is Colin Robertson. Colin is a colleague here in the department. We have Derek Chapman. Derek is a current student in the program, and then we have Tai Doi Kwong, did I do that right? I don't know, but he is a recent graduate of the program. And we also have Apurva Hari. Apurva is also a very recent graduate of the program. So they will be the ones answering the questions related to balancing parenthood and managing or being in the graduate degree program. So we're just going to go ahead and get started here formally. And so before we dive in, I just want to do a quick introduction of the program if you're not already familiar. The MCS and MCS in data science are professional non-thesis computer science degrees that the Illinois Online delivers through Coursera platform. It's 32 credit hours that you can complete in as little as 3 semesters or as many as 5 years, and you pay as you go. Courses cover the material as our same material as our on-campus classes and are taught by the same faculty. You can get more information about the online programs and admission requirements at cs.illinois.edu /online-MCS. So this particular webinar, we're not going to go over admission requirements. There's another webinar next week for that if you want to join, or you can always send us an email at at cs.illinois.edu for specific questions about admissions. So going ahead with our questions, I'd like to have each of our panelists please introduce themselves. Please say your name, how far you are in the degree program, or if you've graduated, what you find to be valuable about being in an online degree, and maybe how many children you have. So Derek, yep.
I'll start. My name is Derek. I'm in my second semester of the degree program. I have one kid, full-time job, etc. And the unique perspective I might have is that my wife finished her master's 2 months before I started my master's. So I am pretty familiar with both sides of the coin.
Great. Ty?
All right, I'm Ty Nguyen. I just finished the program. I did it in 6 semesters, the 8 courses that are required. I work full-time. I have 2 children, one of which was born right after I started the program. So that changed things, the dynamics of things a little bit. And I really appreciated the kind of flexibility that I got with the online learning. I could set hours that I might not be able to have set in a kind of a face-to-face program.
Great. Okay, so if anyone has questions, we'll do a Q&A after we've done our curated questions. So if you have specific questions for the panelists you'd like them to address, please drop it in the Q&A. Okay, next question. Are there specific things about the online format that you find to be helpful as you balance your busy schedules?
So for me, I really enjoyed the online format because it saves me a ton of travel time, and especially living somewhere with soul-crushing traffic, that extra hours per week that I don't do driving around is great. I also like the online portion combined with the Coursera portion, because the Coursera platform allows like kind of a multimodal learning that you can start and stop as needed. Right. So if I do happen to get like an hour on a Saturday where I don't have my kid around, then I can start the videos. And if I don't quite get to the note-taking portion, I can just stop whenever and then come back to it. But I really enjoy the kind of the multimodal, to be able to learn from the videos. There are the PowerPoint notes or the PDF slides that come along with it. And then also you can do your own sort of research on things that you might need to follow up on from the class.
I would also have to agree with what Derek highlighted with the video portion and the accompanying slides that go with it. You can go through those slides at your pace. If you do have a little bit more difficulty around a particular topic, the slides are right there. You don't have to speed through, let's say, the lecture portion in the video. I personally found myself watching the videos at a increased rate, speed, through the sections that I felt comfortable with, and slowed down for the parts that I found a little bit more challenging. So that level of flexibility, and I found that I could watch them at my convenience. If I happen to be traveling for business, or just not being in my usual environment, I could take the videos with me, watch them whenever it's convenient. So I definitely want to highlight the flexibility being a big advantage.
Terrific. And I think,
Can I just add one other thing about that?
Absolutely.
It's great. So being a parent, working full-time, having a house, dogs, etc., there's always something, but there's also things that are coming up. So for example, you have a wedding coming up, that's going to be in your way. One of the great parts about the online program, particularly with Coursera, is that you can literally look at everything that is due. And this class I'm in right now, the professor has been great. Like the first day of the class, we knew when everything was due, when assignments were going to drop, and the ability to look at that and sort of plan out side by side with my life is phenomenal. To be able to, like, I know right now I can't do as much because of whatever's going on, end of February, beginning of March, I know that I'm going to be able to like hammer out stuff, or vice versa. That being able to see that entire course at once and not have to work at the speed of a traditional class is phenomenal. So the last course I knew I had to front load. And so within the first month, I did probably 50% of the class in the first month. And then the only things I really had to wait for were the exams, because those were in a window. But otherwise, being able to work ahead or slower is like phenomenal.
I completely agree with what Derek said. On the other end of the spectrum, having kids, very unpredictable. They can be very unpredictable. Having this format allowed me to squeeze in time when unexpected events do come along, as well as plan around long-term expected events that having a family could introduce. So I felt like it allowed me to be very agile.
That's great to hear that. Great. That's great to hear that that's working for you guys, because that was the intention of the design of the program. So very pleased to hear that was able to accommodate your schedules. I think Apurva, our other panelist, is having technical difficulties, but certainly when she is able to join us via video or audio, we can circle back to that question for her. That sounds okay to you, Derek and Ty? Okay, so the next question, could you share what sorts of tools you found to be valuable to help keep organized or to save time? So they could be external tools that are not necessarily on the platform or on platform that helped you in the process.
Yeah, so one thing that I did, and this wasn't necessarily a tool, it was more of a life review. Before I started the entire program, I literally sat down and wrote out everything that I had to do in life and about how much time it took. Because I had a coach one time tell me that you have time for anything, you just have to give up something. And so I was very realistic, especially being like an older student. I was very realistic about my own life. And I literally wrote down everything and then started checking off, all right, what is non-essential that I can get rid of? So video games, like until I'm done with this program, are dead to me. And that's like 3 to 4 hours a week that I could plug back in, and doing little things like we order food that's pre-made to come. That's a couple hours a week right there. We bought a robot vacuum, just trying to find both little things to give yourself more time and be realistic about the things that you're going to have to cut out, right? Some are non-negotiable. I have to go to work, right? I have to work out. I have to get out exercise. I know that for myself. Otherwise I'll go bananas. But some things were stuff I was like, all right, well, I really enjoy video games, but I guess I'm not going to be doing that. Taking my dogs for long, long walks, I guess I won't be doing that. And just being realistic about your own time frame.
On the subject of time, the lectures, for example, have the duration listed. I often use that time as an estimate of how long would it take to get through this section, and keep that in mind before, let's say, starting. There's some times where I wouldn't want to be interrupted. So if it says this section is going to take 2 hours, then I would look at my own schedule and try to fit that in somewhere. And it's completely listed. The entire program's completely listed, so I could see where there could be heavier weeks than others, and plan around that. So just having that knowledge and then considering it around my own schedule is what I tended to do.
Perfect. So it sounds like just time management and prioritizing.
The other thing that I would add in for pretty much anybody that is married, because when you're married, you have to think about not just your own time, but how does that affect the other person? And those aren't like independent choices. So for me and my wife, we literally, at the beginning of every week on Sunday, we sit down and we set out everything that has to be done and who's going to do those things. But we also have like a whole semester schedule that we started when she was in her master's. So I just knew Mondays and Wednesday nights, she was going to be out studying. Saturday mornings, she was going to be out studying. And so now while I'm in it, we've done the reverse, right? So I know that I'm going to be out Monday and Wednesday evenings. She can plan on that also. And then Saturday mornings, I go to study. And so being able to plan around those big chunks, as well as trying to fit in time somewhere, whether it's like at work or after school or whatever, planning out, especially when you're married, is very, very necessary.
Mhm.
My own experience, I had to do this extra level of planning as well. The other factor is there's often a lot of group work that's required for the courses, and that's another layer of coordination with your team members as well. So there's a lot of considering everyone's different schedules and their conflicts. I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, great. Anything else to add, Derek, on that one? Nope. Okay. Okay, so can you share what is a typical day, week like when it comes to balancing parenting and school responsibilities?
So I kind of mentioned it already for me for a little bit. Like Monday, Wednesday is study night for me because that's when the library is open. Saturday morning, I study again. But I made sure that so my daughter has swim lessons, and I made sure that once a week, I take her to swim lessons so that I could still feel like I was part of her like life, because that's an important thing for her. She's really excited about it. She loves for me to go watch her. So I made sure that once a week, regardless of what else was happening, I was part of that. So that way I still felt part of her life, and still, because it's a minimum 2-year commitment, and to feel like you're absent for 2 years would feel terrible. The other thing that I made sure to do is I leave the house when I want to study, because having your kid like playing is so distracting, because you want to go play with them. You know, something happens, they're crying, they're upset, you want to go comfort them. But it's really like, and some people can probably manage this better than others, but I felt compelled, like, oh, I got to go be involved. And to leave the house really took that out for me. So for scheduling, like some things are non-negotiables. I have to go to work from about like 8 to 3 or whatever. But then even on the weekend, my wife and I would plan out like, all right, so Saturday afternoon, I'm going to Costco. Sunday morning, you're going to the grocery store. I'll take our daughter to church or whatever she wants to do. And then, you know, we reconvene on Sunday to like cook and get ready for the week. And so it feels weird to like plan out like even grocery shopping, but taking that off your stress plate, as it were, knowing you had time to get it done was pretty helpful.
My personal experience was to focus on these studies after, we put our kids to bed. That is also, I guess, a time window where there wouldn't be distractions from our children. It also meant working at fairly late hours sometimes. Usually they'd go to bed relatively early compared to an adult. So my work hours would tend to be, let's say, after 9 p.m. till maybe 11 or midnight during the week, and the weekends are a little bit more flexible. What I tried to do was to study a little bit more steadily so I could get a little bit in and not lose track of, where I am in the course. I wouldn't just have a large crunch time where I'm studying for 12 hours. That just wouldn't work very well. But putting in an hour or two every day, for me, typically later in the evening seemed to work well, and it paced the content and my absorption of the material a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. What have some of the challenges have been that you've experienced, and what are the biggest affordances of earning a degree online?
Sorry, can you say that second half again?
What are the biggest affordances of earning a degree online?
So for the first part of the question, one of the biggest challenges that I did not expect, and Ty mentioned this earlier, was when there's group projects, your project members could be all over the world. Like we had somebody in the chat say they were from Iraq, And that was something I did not expect at all. So something as simple as, we're starting the project, and my first thing was, all right, let's all get together and chat in real time, and trying to coordinate me in Hawaii, somebody in Brazil, and then somebody in the Philippines, right, was crazy. And so that was a challenge that I did not expect. And we were able to overcome it because everyone was flexible, right? So one guy did the meeting at, I think he was at like 9 a.m. And then one guy, literally, he joined the meeting at 11 p.m. from Brazil. So being flexible with that was very key. And I think also choosing your partners wisely helped a lot. Not just, so I chose my partners not based on how good or how smart I thought they were, but how flexible they were, and how based on personality almost of like, and I thought that was pretty helpful. But that was a challenge I did not expect. But seeing in the list here, right, we got Toronto, Iraq, Nashville, I think Japan. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, especially in the first semester when the course I was taking required group work. What I saw happen a lot was people were asking about what time zone everyone was in, so that they can at least try to communicate with other people in the same time zone. There wouldn't be this kind of spread out over the world, thing happening. But after a few semesters, when you do go through the same program with other students, I found that the time zones didn't matter as long as you found you could work with your teammates. I returned to the same people as long as they were taking the same course, because I was familiar with them, and the time difference wasn't as big a factor as just knowing, building a rapport and knowing what to expect from your teammates was, contributed to productivity a lot more than we were lining up all at the same time in the world.
Okay, great. So was it then, going back to Derek's initial response about the fact that there are students from various parts of the globe, was that, I guess, that was surprising to you?
It was totally unexpected, because I had to take my typical how I would run a project based on, my previous schooling, and then realign it with the reality of people from all over the world. And so I had to stop thinking of project work in the way that I was. And so once I made that shift, having people in different time zones wasn't a problem. It was much more about organizing it. And thank God for things like Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets, where everybody can contribute. We made a task list, we separated things out. And also being an adult about things really helps, in saying, I had one guy that said, I can't do anything for 3 weeks, but I guarantee this week I will get this whole end part of it done. And being able to own up to when you can and can't work. It would have been way worse had he been like, oh yeah, I'll help. And then 3 weeks go by with nothing, and you're not sure why. And then also, the flip side of that, being able to talk to somebody, being like, I don't really think you're pulling your weight, you need to help out with this. But doing it in an adult, professional manner. So the time zone didn't end up being a problem, pretty much at all. It was just really unexpected for me.
Yeah, I know you asked about tools earlier.
Right,
Collaborative tools, super valuable. Something like Google Docs. It doesn't have to be Google Docs. It could be Overleaf or anything where team members can contribute simultaneously or at their leisure, and they would all go to the same place. So I definitely use Google Docs or some kind of Google Drive tool a lot, so that people can work with their own schedule. Everyone's on a slightly different schedule, and it allowed the collaboration to run much more smoothly. I know in my last semester, I was working with a team member in China. I'm in North America, and we touch base, once a week or so, but we could work on that same document that we needed to work on when it was convenient for us. And collaborative tools became invaluable to the kind of work we had to do.
So besides Google Docs, what can you talk about some of the other tools that you used?
To a much smaller extent, email, but that can be difficult. Slack ended up, I don't particularly care for Slack, and I find it to be quite confusing, but it ended up being very helpful because, you know, people would do stuff, and then whenever you came back, you could just go back and see the conversation as it went along, and then being able to link in files as part of the conversation. So Slack was pretty useful. But for us, that collaborative, like Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets was great, or whatever you might use for that. Being able to link, like, all right, here's the task list, and then linking it to a file, like this is the one. And then also Git, because a lot of this is obviously code based, being able to use Git and see what others had done and then can contribute your parts. And so for some of the projects, we literally set out a project leader who was in charge of pulling things to make sure stuff didn't get wacky.
I used Piazza quite a bit. I like the digest format where I could get an email no more frequently than once every 4 hours, and I would quickly review, you know, what's being discussed about the course in, you know, the recent past. And a lot of the questions that were brought are questions that I had on my mind as well. And then I go into the forum and see what perhaps some of the responses are. If I felt like I could contribute, I would do that too. And it was a fairly a fairly beneficial environment. And it was archived too, so you could look at past conversations fairly easily to see you know, what kind of resolutions people came up with any, you know, problem, whether it's technical or non-technical.
Just to add on to the Piazza thing, one of the great parts about the online program, and it seems somewhat counterintuitive, but in my online classes, I've spoken to professors and TAs way more than I ever did in a real life, because there's multiple sources or multiple ways to talk. So the TA hours are awesome. And having those several times during the week is great. And then Piazza, you actually get responses from TAs and the professors. So you put up a question and you get a mix of answers, right? Students who have their own, might be a little more experienced, they give answers. Other students that are clarifying their own problems that are part of it. And then you also get the TAs and the professors answering it. So that's been phenomenal. But being able to actually access the TAs and professors when you have time to do it is phenomenal. Like it's really changed my view of an online course.
Yeah, I've definitely taken advantage of TA and professor hours as well. And it's basically through Zoom, and I could actually share my screen instead of trying to describe a problem. If I had a picture of it or something I wanted to show, I could just share my screen, and I'd get a much better response than trying to describe it in words. So the sharing aspect of that was quite valuable.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And actually, what we've heard, just going off of, you know, what you both said, is that these online courses, the students have more access, actually interact more with the faculty and TAs than some of our on-campus courses, just because of what Derek had, you know, mentioned, that there are so many various channels that you can access them and reach them and interact with them. So that's great to hear that was working for you guys. Okay, and so let's see, shall we get to student questions, or Colin, did you want to poll the audience?
I think we could try to get to a few questions that have been submitted here. So one question, Michael asks, while you were in the program, have either you had the opportunity to change your job or role while balancing your family time?
I have not. I have stuck with the same job primarily because of the course, and I just felt like it would be too much to like leave and go get another job. Plus my job, I specifically chose this job because it affords so many things, so many benefits, such as being able to like do some schoolwork at work, because obviously I'm at work right now in my dungeon office. So I did not switch roles. That seemed like just one too many things.
In my second semester with the program, I did change both jobs, and I found myself with another child to take care of. I didn't find that to be a huge disruption in the way I was studying. It didn't impact me, as much as I would have expected. I was still keeping similar hours while my job changed and my responsibilities changed. I still found myself able to work in the hours I had chosen for myself, which I'd mentioned earlier, were in the later evening. That I wasn't expected at my job either before or after to be working those kind of hours, and those are hours that I felt like I could keep. Having a child and now two children, that time was also, I found myself available at that time. So in terms of studying for the program, because of the choices I made there, it didn't really affect the way I was taking the program.
There's a similar question in the chat. Was there any time when you lost continuity in the course because something came up at work or in your personal life? If yes, how did you catch up and get back up to speed?
So yes, things always come up, right? Our dog got super sick. I was out of work the last 2 days because we had a major electrical problem in our house. Like, something always comes up. So for me, I try and be proactive. As like a relatively mature adult, I know it's better to be ahead and then slip than be on track and slip, right? Because then you're behind. So one of my professors one time said, early is on time is late. So I try and make sure like I'm always, and via Coursera and the online program, it's very easy to get ahead. And I see the more successful students, because you can track pretty much how people are doing in the courses. I see the more successful students, they're the ones that are like 1 or 2 weeks ahead. So when you hit those things like, oh shoot, I have to spend 2 days straight with an electrician, it's not as big a deal. So if you were just on track and then lost 2 whole days, like, it is tough to catch up, because some of the weeks might take you 15 hours, right? Because it might be a project week along with like a lot of videos and a lot of notes, or God forbid you're behind when it comes exam time because you need to study for those exams. So being ahead better than trying to catch up.
I completely agree with Derek there. Whenever possible, I try to work ahead as much as I could. I think typically I could get 2 to 3 weeks ahead, and I completely used that time because I remember some family things came up or job things came up, and I had to use that currency that I built up. So that being ahead 2 to 3 weeks, that went to I'm just on time now, but it was planned ahead. I felt like it was a much better situation than if I just went at, let's say, a normal pace and then found myself overwhelmed with some events and then started falling behind. That's a situation I didn't want to get myself into. So whenever possible, especially at the beginning of a semester, I tried to work as much as I possibly could to just get that little bit of a buffer. And that buffer has definitely come in very handy because of the unpredictability in professional and personal lives. Having a format like the online program allowed me to do that.
There are a couple questions here about the overall workload. What one person's asking, is it possible to work full-time, 40 hours a week, but still graduate within 1.5 years? And another person's asking about balancing the overall workload and still giving enough time to children. The child's about to enter high school, for example, and helping the child with their studies.
That it depends on the person too, right? So what one person thinks is doable might be overwhelming for somebody else. For me, I've found it very doable to have a full-time job with kind of a lot of responsibilities. I have to come during the evening sometimes, have a kid, have 2 dogs, own a house, have a wife, be part of my neighborhood association board. It's what is important to you and how much you can really like sort of push yourself, right? So when I'm studying, and so I study very differently than Ty, and so you figure out what is right for you. So when I'm studying, that's the only thing I'm doing. And so that is my only focus. And so when I'm at home and I'm with my daughter, that's my only focus. Like my phone is in a different room. We don't really watch TV. Like my kid is my focus. And it's like, to an extent, like it's kind of tiring after a while, but this is the thing that I chose. And knowing that knowing the goal ahead of time and really wanting that goal has been phenomenal. And so again, I go back to like, you have to choose the priorities in your life because you can't do it all. And for me, the priorities are my kid, my degree, and then basically everything else in life.
Yeah, I also tend to try to focus, maybe not under the same schedule that Derek has. Just putting some numbers out there, I would estimate per week, per course, I'd probably spend 10 to 15 hours on average. Some weeks are heavier, some weeks are lighter. But I would at least try to plan out 10 to 15 hours at some point, like at various points in the week, to find myself comfortable with the pace that the course would be delivered. A student who also just graduated actually kept much closer track of his time. He had basically a stopwatch, went through the entire program and timed himself how much time he spent on assignments and tests and just general studying. And it worked out to be a similar amount of time. I think he averaged about 16 hours per course per week.
How many courses have you taken in a semester? What's sort of how high have you maxed out, I guess, on courses? Has it just been one per semester or more than that?
Yeah, I've only done 1 per semester, and then this fall I will be doing 2. I think that depending upon your comfort level and how good you are with specifically math and coding coming in. So for me, the first course was a bit of a mathematical shock because I haven't been in a math class in like 15 years. And so it was almost like taking 2 classes where I was taking the regular class and then I was going back and trying to relearn some of the math that was part of it. So I'm hopeful by the time I get to this fall, I'll have already taken 3 courses, right? Fall, spring, summer. So when I take 2 courses in the fall, but I'm actually already kind of planning for that. And so I've been saving up my vacation time. So I know come this fall, I'm sort of mentally planning on, I'm going to take, maybe a week in October off, maybe a week in November off so that I can really focus on those classes. But I think it will be a struggle, but I think it will be doable since I have that goal in mind.
I took a course a semester, except for 2 semesters where I took 2 courses. So I finished the 8-course program in 6 semesters. The 2 semesters where I took 2 courses, I had concerns that it would just, the workload would be too great. It was heavier, obviously, than taking 1 course, but I found that, I was able to handle it, just trying to be as prepared as I could for those courses before I started. I tried to learn about the subject ahead of time in the break between semesters to do my own kind of studying ahead, which helped me adjust to the material. I also found, for me personally, that a lot of the cross-listed courses, like those cross-listed with statistics, a little bit more challenging for me in terms of the amount of work I had to do. But I mean, for someone who might be more familiar or just more comfortable with the statistics courses, maybe be a breeze. I'm not sure. I just felt like there's a lot more asked of me for some courses than others. And I tried to learn as much as I could about what would be taught and then decide whether I wanted to take or I was able to take 2 courses in one semester. I'd definitely say I'd recommend to anyone to be very careful with that if you also have like a full-time job and family, to really think and see how comfortable you might be with the courses that you're about to take if you want to take on more than one course per semester.
So Ty, just a quick follow-up. Did you take the 2 courses in a semester before the newborn or after the newborn?
One was during the semester my newborn was born.
Okay.
I actually decided to take the 2 courses knowing what was ahead, that my family life would just be that much more complicated or heavy. And I tried to slip that in, and that worked. I think that actually worked better. I did have that in mind. The second semester that I took with 2 courses was the one immediately after. So, there's obviously a lot of work when it comes to raising kids, but I find infants a little bit more predictable. Like, they're very needy.
Okay.
They're very needy, but you know what they want. Whereas as they get older, they're maturing human beings, so they can get a little bit more unpredictable. Less needy, but more unpredictable.
Audience member asks, the 15 hours was just for one course that you had estimated earlier, right? Or
yeah, that would be my personal estimate for my experience.
Yeah, and I think that's on par with what we typically advise students, is at least 10 to 12 and easily more depending on your skill levels, right? I think that's probably a fair assessment of coursework expected for each course.
I had a question about, how do you judge that you've understood the lecture content well enough to apply it at work and do well on the exams? He says, you could spend any length of time studying on various topics. So,
yeah, that's a good question, and it's a really tough one to answer because you don't know until you actually take the exam. And I think it's really common in specifically the tech field, this sort of like imposter syndrome, like, do I really belong here? Like, and sort of this, I found this, especially with the younger members in the course, this almost like drive to push themselves to prove that they were supposed to be there. But for me personally, I had a real, like, I got the grade I deserved. So the first exam I took, I did not study that much for. I was like, oh, I got this. This is a breeze, no big deal. And I got lucky and got an 80%. And so the second exam, the final exam for that course, I was like, nope, not doing that again, not making that mistake again. And so that, because I was ahead, that week before the exam opened, like, I just studied and I made flashcards and I just sat there anytime I could. And I ended up getting 100% on the second exam, I think, by virtue of just studying. And so I think it's really up to each individual to figure out when they have it, right? And only you know if you have it. So my judgment is always, could I explain this thing to somebody that knows nothing about it and seem somewhat coherent, right? Like, obviously they're not going to understand the intricacies of like the Bayesian formula, but can I at least somewhat describe it to them? And that was kind of my metric. But you're right. You can, and one of the things I really struggle with is not like getting stuck on something and being like, oh, let me just go down this rabbit hole. And I literally make a list of things like, oh, this seems interesting, I want to look into this later. But if it's not on that course and it's not part of what I might be like quizzed on or tested on, it's sort of irrelevant. And I just trust that when I'm done with this course, I'll have skills that will benefit me in whatever like data analyst, data science kind of job I might get.
I found that a lot of the courses do have regular quizzes that aren't worth that much of your final grade. And it gave me a sense of what to expect for things like exams that are worth a lot more. So if I felt like I could I was doing fairly well with the quizzes, that was already a good indicator for me that I should do fairly well in the exam, or I'm at least ready for the exam material, which is really a roundup of everything up to that point. So those little, that little bit of testing that it gave me, it allowed me to navigate and see what material I should know at that point in the course. So I definitely, I guess to summarize, I definitely use the quizzes as a gauge of my understanding, and they weren't a huge part of the final grade anyway, most of the time.
Okay, great. Colin, any more questions?
Another question sort of about the value of the program. I was wondering, how has the program changed your overall thinking? Do you feel like you have new conceptual tools that you apply to your lives extend outside the classroom?
I don't know. I mean, data science applied to like your real life. I don't know about that, but it's been helpful for me to be exposed to new concepts, new ideas, new people. The professors are like, you when you join a program, there's sort of you're trusting that you're going to get a value out of it. And then once you get into the program, you start to see like more like, is this the value that you expected it to be? And thus far, the professors have been like phenomenal. One professor was phenomenal in the sense that his knowledge of his subject was like borderline world class. And it was interesting to be reading papers from other universities that would reference his work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd be like, oh, I recognize that name. And then a different professor had a ton of real world experience. He like started his own company based on computer vision, and he had a ton of real world experience that he could bring to it. And so some of his explanations, you could tell were things like he had done. So I've enjoyed feeling like, because I'm putting in all this time and money and stress, I feel like I'm actually getting the value that I had hoped for out of the program thus far.
I felt like I was very fortunate that when I took a course, for example, I took a data visualization, just so happens that my own work required some design work in data visualization. So I could immediately apply what I learned and reinforce what I learned just because that situation came up at work. I can't obviously say that's a guarantee for everyone listening, but I found that very useful. Then going through machine learning, again, I guess serendipitously, there was a problem that needed to be solved at my work that required some kind of machine learning, and I immediately was able to apply some of the concepts toward that. So having the opportunity to apply in the real world what I learned, really reinforced what I had just taken. I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. Even in situations where it didn't directly apply to my workplace, I really enjoyed taking the program. So any ideas or concepts that I came across, whenever I had time, I would try to think of how I could apply that, playing a what if, some, I don't know, Markov chain model. Like I don't have today, I don't have an application of that, but I just found it super interesting. And, I could try to look up something in Kaggle and try to take on a challenge, just to keep those ideas in my mind alive, just from pure interest. I really liked the program. I liked that it really tested me. I've taken other online programs before that, let's say, were free. And so I often found myself it's if I don't do it, what do I have to lose? I guess a little bit of time and no financial penalty at all. And I found that I wouldn't say I felt pressured, but I felt like I felt more motivated and inspired to go through all the steps required of me through the program. And then, the material actually stuck much more than kind of casually taking a free online course.
Excellent. Colin, if there are no more questions.
The other questions.
Oh, there are more
We
questions?
have some time, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not using the tool probably as well as I should here. Couple questions about external resources and reference materials. One is, did you feel the need to use any external resources for the coursework? Like you mentioned Udemy, Pluralsight, Safari Books, and someone else is wondering, do you have access to the library as part of the online program? And what's your experience in terms of reference material? So.
Yeah, so you have access to the library, and then all of the libraries that the University of Illinois Library has access to. So actually in both of my courses, the main book was available for free. And I don't guarantee this for all the classes, but in my experience, both of the classes I've taken thus far, the main book was available for free through the University of Illinois Library system, which has been great. And then I just printed out a copy, and then I had the book, and I didn't need to buy the $110 version off of Amazon. There's lots of both of the classes thus far, there's lots of supplemental materials that you can go and read, but I've done got a ton of outside resources on things that were a struggle for me, right? So some of the things I just skipped right over, like, pandas visualization. I already took some classes in that before I even started this program, so I felt comfortable, like, whatever, I got that, no big deal. But some of the more complicated matrix calculations, I bought a book on it. And when I had time, I would read through that. So yeah, using those external resources, whatever you need to do to understand the thing and get the thing done, is a great value. The University of Illinois Libraries system has access to a ton of stuff, and it's great to be able to get all those different resources for free.
Yeah, I've definitely leveraged my access to electronic publications through the University of Illinois Library system. A few of the courses I've taken required actually pure research, reviewing peer-reviewed publications that if I wasn't enrolled in the program, I'd have to pay quite a bit to access these journal articles. But just logging through the University of Illinois library system, they were freely available. It was just a matter of being authenticated as having access through the university. Definitely, I definitely used that. I needed to have that access, and it was available to me to do some of the work that was required.
So additional question, someone's wondering about what's your experience with online exams, or how do they work? Is it similar to the homework?
I'll give the objective part first, and then the subjective part first. So far, all the exams have been via ProctorU or Proctor University. And so basically what happens is somebody from somewhere else sort of watches you and monitors you while you take the exam. You log into the ProctorU website, you log into the Coursera exam website, and then you give permission to the ProctorU person to monitor your screen, monitor your microphone, monitor your video. So you go into a room, not this one because there's stuff everywhere. You go into a room, you have to hold up the you have to hold up the webcam on your laptop and turn to show them the room. So it's very kind of secure, and it's nice because once you get taking the exam, it's just like a normal online exam, right? Answer the questions, fill in the thing, do your calculations. And it's no different than if you went to take for example, the SAT. You have to show them your calculator before you start. No phones. You can bring in 2 pencils, 2 pieces of paper. The only difference is that the person watching you is 2,000 miles away. the subjective part of it is that ProctorU can be a huge pain to get working. So always, like, whenever your exam starts at like 11 and it goes until 12, you're probably going to be there till 1. Yeah, sorry. I know I don't know if I'm supposed to like throw out like,
No, that's very good.
like
And
honest pieces, but
I will look into that. Okay.
yeah. But otherwise, other than the ProctorU, the online exam format was great because you can schedule when you take it. So I know, all right, I work best at 10 a.m. in the morning, so I take the day off. I schedule my exam for 10 a.m. I have my snack and I get ready, and then take the exam at my leisure.
Derek, I'm so glad you responded first. The objective part, totally agree. The whole setting up the room just right and setting up your computer just right, being watched while you're taking it. It's not as nerve-wracking as I thought it'd be. It was just, they're just in the background. The webcam light is on, knowing that you're being watched. But it didn't bother me. I focused on the material, did the calculations I needed to do, and then try to answer the best I could. I felt very fortunate that I never had any technical glitches related to ProctorU at all. Most of the exams I took, I finished definitely within the estimated or allotted time, sometimes even a little bit quicker. And the video feed never really froze. Like I said, there are no real technical issues for me personally. I mean, I've read. I'm hoping more of an exceptional cases where some technical thing didn't quite work out and they had to reschedule the exam. As far as I know, you can just reschedule your exam if there was a technical issue that just couldn't be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
There are second chances. That said, it's probably best to schedule your exam earlier in the allotted exam period than to give yourself those afforded opportunities if something does go wrong, instead of trying to slot yourself into the very last exam slot, and then if something blows up, you're kind of stuck. Like, to reiterate, nothing went south for me from a technical standpoint. So it went fairly smoothly. Once I got over the nerves of just being watched while I was trying to take a test.
I am enjoying Derek's facial expressions while Ty was describing his experience. Okay, one more question,
Mostly
Colin?
I'm just jealous. Mostly I'm just jealous because I wanted mine to go smoothly too.
There was one more going back to sort of cross collaboration over across continents. Wondering what you did for in-person collaboration. If you're able to do that, video sharing, screen sharing, conference calls, that sort of stuff. What sort of tools did you use if you did that?
Yeah, so like we mentioned earlier, the collaboration tools are already available, like Google Docs and Google Sheets and stuff. And so one of the things I learned was just really limit the in-person, like Skype, FaceTime, VoIP phone calls, because it's just like troublesome. So for me and the group projects that I've done, what I've learned is basically try and get one like in-person at the beginning, so you guys can really try and set out as much as possible, like within like half an hour, and then maybe like a week or something before the project is due, come back for one more like in person, so you can just hammer out the finer details of like whatever deliverables there are. But otherwise, like, we didn't even try to have like real-time synchronous meetings at all. It was all asynchronous, and at first it was like a little annoying because you were like trying to get a response, but then after a while you just realize like, oh, he's going to respond at this time, so I'll just wait until the morning, and then I've got whatever. And we got kind of in a groove where like I would work, and then that evening he would do his work, and then in the morning I would do my section, and it would just flip-flop back and forth, and it actually wasn't too bad. Some parts, like I think Ty mentioned, like I wanted to go back to being watched on the camera. At first you think like, oh, that's really invasive, that's weird, but you get over it really quick. That was something my wife had mentioned, because she had done her master's before me. She was like, I couldn't have handled that, like somebody watching me and listening. But it's really no different than Like you go to take any proctored exam somewhere, and it's just like somebody watching you. It just happens to be through a webcam, somebody that's 3,000 miles away. And so, sort of maybe my problems were more because I live on an island in the middle of the Pacific. Maybe that's just me.
Ty, anything to add to that?
The way I've done group projects, we tried to find a common time that everyone could agree to at least once a week. That seemed to work all right. So we found a time that just worked for everyone. We touched base, and the objective of those meetings was to set out action items for everyone to do what they needed to do for the upcoming week before the next meeting. And then we tend to agree and then go off and do our thing and then touch base again the next week. And having that regular schedule seemed to work fairly well for the groups I was in, even if, like I said, in some cases, we weren't even remotely in the same time zone. It'd be morning for someone and evening for someone else. But as long as we can establish our roles within the team, it worked fairly smoothly. And touching base regularly kept us on track and identified any issues that the team would have to take on.
Perfect. Well, we are at the end of the session. We really want to thank Derek and Ty for joining us. This was a lot of fun and very insightful. I hope all the attendees found some useful information here. Thank you again. Thank you so much for agreeing to serve as panelists. Thank you, Colin, for joining me today. But we're going to go ahead and end the session and have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.